Sometimes, life tests you long after you think you've been broken. Clara Hensley had already lost her husband and her daughter. But that day, by the creek behind her cabin, she found something that would change everything: a cry for help, a life hanging by a thread, and the chance for redemption she never saw coming. This is the cabin in the Ozarks. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Missouri Ozarks, casting a golden haze across the rolling hills and the little creek that snaked past my cabin. I was 67 years old, knees creaky from years of tending gardens and hauling firewood, but I still found peace in the quiet of my land. My name is Clara Hensley, and I've lived alone in this cedar-sided cabin near Willow Springs since my husband, passed 6 years ago. My daughter, Hannah, was taken from me by addiction a decade before that, leaving a hole in my heart that never quite healed. The cabin, with its sagging porch and wildflower patches, was my refuge, a place where memories lingered, but didn't sting as much as they used to. That September day, I was kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds from my tomato patch, when a scream pierced the air. It wasn't a human scream, not exactly, more like a wail, raw and desperate, coming from the woods beyond the creek. I froze, my trowel hovering over the soil. The sound came again, fainter but unmistakable, carried on the breeze. My first thought was an animal, maybe a fox caught in a trap, but something about it felt wrong. Too human, too close. Stood, brushing dirt from my jeans, and squinted toward the tree line. The creek was only 100 yards off, its waters glinting through the pines. I grabbed my walking stick, not because I needed it, but because it felt like a shield, and started toward the sound. My heart thumped harder than it should be for a woman used to the quiet of these hills. I told myself it was nothing, just the wind or a wounded critter, but my gut churned with a dread I couldn't shake. As I neared the creek, I saw her. Leela, my niece, the daughter of my estranged sister, Faye. Leela, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, not since Faye's funeral when she screamed at me for not doing more to save her mother from her own demons. Leela was 29, now, her dark hair tangled, her face flushed like she'd been running. She stood at the creek's edge, wrestling with a backpack, a heavy, black one that looked too big for her slight frame. She glanced around, her eyes wild, guilty, like a deer caught in headlights. She didn't see me, half hidden by the trees. Leela, I called, my voice sharper than I meant. She didn't hear me, or maybe she ignored me. Her arms strained as she swung the backpack once, twice, then heaved it into the creek. It hit the water with a dull splash, floated for a moment, then started to sink, pulled down by its weight. Leela didn't wait. She bolted back to a rusted pickup truck parked on the dirt path, climbed in, and peeled out, tires kicking up gravel. The engine's roar faded, leaving only the ripple of the creek and the hammering of my pulse. I stood there, stunned, my mind racing. What had I just seen? Leela, throwing a backpack into the water like it was evidence, like it was something she needed gone. The way she moved, frantic, secretive, reminded me of Hannah in her worst days, when she'd sneak off to hide her needles or pawned jewelry. But this felt different, heavier, wrong. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I stumbled down the slope to the creek, my boots slipping on the mossy rocks. The water was shallow but fast, fed by recent rains, and the backpack was already half submerged, caught on a snag of roots. I waded in without thinking. The cold bit into my shins, soaking my jeans, but I didn't care. I grabbed the strap and pulled, my arms shaking from the effort. The bag was heavier than it looked, maybe 30 pounds, and the current fought me every inch. I yanked harder, my breath coming in gasps, until I dragged it onto the muddy bank. That's when I heard it. A muffled, choking sound from inside the backpack. My blood turned to ice. No, it couldn't be. Please, Lord, don't let it be what I think, I whispered, my voice trembling as much as my hands. I dropped to my knees, my fingers fumbling with the zipper. It was stuck, the fabric sodden and swollen. I clawed at it, my nails catching, my breath hitching. Come on, I muttered, tears blurring my vision. The zipper gave way with a rasp, and I flung the flap open. The world stopped. My heart stopped. There, curled in a soaked blanket, was a child, a toddler, no more than 2 years old. His face was pale, his lips tinged blue, his eyes half closed. He wasn't moving, but a weak, raspy breath escaped his mouth. He was alive. Barely. His tiny body was wrapped in a fleece blanket, now heavy with water, and his clothes, a faded onesie, were plastered to his skin. I reached in, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold him. He was so small, so light, like a bird fallen from its nest. I lifted him out, cradling him against my chest, his cold cheek against my neck. No, 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 I whispered, over and over, rocking him instinctively. I pressed my ear to his chest. A faint heartbeat, slow but there. I felt for his breath, a tiny puff of air against my finger. He was alive, but he wouldn't be for long if I didn't move fast. My legs nearly buckled as I stood, clutching him tightly. The creek gurgled behind me, indifferent, as I ran toward the cabin, my boots squelching, my heart screaming. I burst through the door, yelling words I don't even remember, maybe, help, maybe just nonsense. I grabbed the phone from the kitchen counter, my fingers slipping on the keys as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, professional. A child. I found a child in a backpack in the creek. He's barely breathing, he's cold, please send help. My voice cracked, high and frantic. Mom, stay calm. Can you tell me your address? I stammered out my address, Rural Route 3, Willow Springs, Missouri, the old Hensley place by the creek. The operator told me to lay the boy on a flat surface. I swept dishes and a salt shaker off the kitchen table, the crash echoing in the quiet cabin. I laid him down gently, his tiny body looking so fragile against the scarred wood. Is he breathing? The operator asked. I leaned close, watching his chest. A faint rise, so small I almost missed it. Yes, barely. He's so cold. Dry him gently with a clean towel and wrap him to keep him warm. The ambulance is on its way. I ran to the bathroom, grabbed every towel I could find, and dried his tiny body with shaking hands. His skin was clammy, his lips still blue. I wrapped him in a fresh towel, then a quilt from the couch, tucking it around him like a cocoon. I picked him up again, rocking him, singing something, maybe a lullaby I used to sing to Hannah, maybe just nonsense to keep him here, to keep him fighting. Hold on, little one, I whispered. Help's coming. You're not alone. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later, the longest 12 minutes of my life. Sirens cut through the dusk, red and blue lights flashing through the windows. 2 paramedics, a weary man with a gray mustache, and a young woman with a tight ponytail, burst in. The woman took the boy from me, her hands moving with practiced speed. She checked his pulse, listened to his chest with a stethoscope. Hypothermia. Weak pulse, she said to her partner. We need to move now. They placed him on a tiny stretcher, an oxygen mask over his face, wires and monitors sprouting like vines. The man looked at me. You coming? I nodded, grabbing my coat, and following them to the ambulance. My clothes were still wet, my boots caked with mud, but none of it mattered. The boy mattered. The ambulance tore down the dirt road toward Willow Springs Community Hospital, a small facility 20 minutes away. I sat in the back, watching the paramedics work, their hands steady despite the swaying vehicle. How did you find him? The woman asked, not looking up. In a backpack in the creek. My niece threw it in. Her eyes flicked to me, then to her partner. A look passed between them. Concern, maybe suspicion. You saw who did it. Yes, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my head. Leela, my niece. We reached the hospital in record time. The emergency room doors swung open, and a team of nurses and a doctor swarmed the stretcher. They shouted terms I didn't understand, hypoxia, bradycardia, IV fluids, as they wheeled him through double doors. I tried to follow, but a nurse stopped me. Mom, you need to wait here. We'll take care of him. She led me to a waiting room with beige walls and hard plastic chairs. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee. I sank into a seat, my wet clothes clinging to me, my hands still trembling. A nurse, older, with kind eyes and a name tag reading, Maggie, sat across from me. I need you to tell me what happened, she said, her voice soft but firm. I told her everything, the scream, Lila's truck, the backpack, the boy. She typed notes on a tablet, her face unreadable. When I finished, she sighed. The police will want to talk to you. This is serious. Attempted homicide, at the least. The words hit like a slap. Attempted homicide. Leela, The girl I'd known since she was a baby, who used to braid daisies into crowns at my picnic table, a murderer. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Maggie placed a hand on mine. You saved that boy's life. That's what matters now. But it didn't feel like saving. It felt like I'd stumbled into a nightmare, one that started with Hannah's death and never stopped growing. The police arrived an hour later, a deputy named Sheriff Tom Baxter, a burly man in his 50s I'd known since high school, and a younger officer taking notes. Tom's eyes softened when he saw me. Clara, what the hell happened out there? I told the story again. Every detail etched into my mind: Lila's flushed face, the heavy backpack, the boy's blue lips. Tom listened, his jaw tightening. You're sure it was Lila? Positive. It was her truck, her face. I'd know her anywhere. Why would she do this? Tom asked, more to himself than me. I don't know, I said. We haven't talked in years. Not since Faye's funeral. Tom nodded, scribbling in his notebook. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow for a formal statement. And Clara, don't contact Lila. Not a word. Understand? I nodded, but my mind was spinning. What could I even say to her? Why did you try to kill a child? Why the creek? Why now? Maggie brought me dry scrubs from the hospital storage and a cup of weak coffee. Go home, Clara. Get some rest. We'll call if anything changes. But I couldn't leave. That boy, that tiny, fragile life I'd pulled from the creek, was alone in there, fighting. I stayed in the waiting room, the plastic chair digging into my back. Every hour, I asked Maggie for updates. Stable but critical, she'd say. He's a fighter. At midnight, Pastor Jim from the Baptist church showed up. Someone must be called him. Small towns talk fast. He sat beside me, his weathered hands folded. God puts us where we need to be, he said after a long silence. This doesn't feel like God, I replied. It feels like hell. He didn't argue, just sat there, his presence a quiet anchor. I appreciated that more than words. By dawn, I was exhausted, my eyes burning, my body aching from the cold and the strain. Maggie brought me a breakfast sandwich, insisting I eat. I choked it down, the bread tasteless. The boy's temperature is stabilizing, she said. His lungs are clearing. It's a good sign. Can I see him? I asked. Not yet. Immediate family only, and we don't know who his family is. Family. The word twisted in my gut. That boy had a family, Lila, maybe a father out there, but she'd tried to drown him. Who was he? Why hadn't anyone reported him missing? The questions piled up, heavy as the backpack had been. At 9 a.m. Tom returned with a female deputy, Sarah, who had sharp eyes and a notepad. Clara, we need to go over this again, she said. There's something off. My stomach clenched. We found Lila's truck at a gas station in West Plains, 30 miles from here, at 4:30 p.m. yesterday, 10 minutes after you say you saw her at the creek. Security footage shows her pumping gas. That's impossible, I said, my voice shaking. I saw her. I know what I saw. Sarah slid a photo across the table, a grainy still of Lila at a gas pump, time-stamped 4:30 p.m. It was her truck, her license plate. But I'd seen her at the creek at 4:20. There's a mistake, I insisted. Maybe the camera's time is wrong. We're checking, Sarah said, but her tone was skeptical. What's your relationship with Lila? You too close? No, I admitted. Not since Faye died. Lila blamed me, said I should be done more for her mom. We haven't spoken since. Do you blame her for anything? For Hannah, maybe. The question hit like a punch. Hannah's addiction had torn our family apart. Lila was her cousin, her enabler sometimes, sneaking her cash when I tried to cut her off. I'd resented Lila for it, but I never said it out loud. That's got nothing to do with this, I said, too sharply. Sarah leaned forward. We can't find Lila. Her apartment's empty, her phone's off. You're the only one who claims to have seen her yesterday. We need to be sure, Clara. You think I'm lying? My voice rose, drawing looks from a nurse across the room. I pulled that boy out of the creek. I saved him. I believe you, Tom said, his voice calmer. But we need to find Lila. If she did this, that boy's in danger. If she didn't, we've got a bigger problem. They left me with a card and more questions than answers. Was I wrong? Had grief and guilt twisted my memory? I'd been so sure it was Lila, but now doubt crept in like damp rot. Pastor Jim returned at noon, a thermos of soup in hand. Let's pray, he said. I wasn't much for religion anymore, not since Hannah's death, but I let him. The words soothed me, even if I didn't believe them. At 2 p.m., a doctor, a young woman with tired eyes, approached. "We need your consent for some tests on the boy. Blood work, scans, to check for trauma or exposure to substances. You're not family, but you're the only one here." I signed the forms, barely reading them. I just wanted him to live. A social worker, Emily, arrived an hour later. She was in her 30s, with a clipboard and a practiced smile. "Ms. Hensley, we need to discuss the boy's situation. He'll need a temporary home when he's stable." Temporary home. The words felt like a betrayal. "He's not a stray dog. I saved him." "I know," Emily said, her voice gentle but firm. "But there are protocols. Foster care, certified families. We'll need to investigate his origins, find his parents. His mother tried to kill him," I snapped. "And I'm not letting him go to strangers." Emily's smile faltered. "You're 67, Ms. Hensley. You live alone, with no legal tie to the child. There's also an ongoing investigation. We have to prioritize his safety." "I'm his safety," I said, my voice breaking. "I pulled him from that creek. I felt his heart against mine." "I understand," she said, scribbling something. "We'll need to evaluate you, background checks, home visits, psychological assessments. It's a process." "How long?" "Months, maybe. Until then, he'll be in state care." The thought of that boy in a foster home, with people who didn't know him, didn't love him, broke something in me. "What if I want to care for him?" I asked, the words spilling out. Emily looked surprised. "You'd need to apply for foster certification. It's rigorous. Training, inspections, proof of stability. Your age and recent loss could complicate things." Recent loss. Hannah, as if her death 10 years ago still defined me. I wanted to scream that I was capable, that I'd raised a daughter, that I'd saved this boy. But I just nodded, my jaw tight. That night, Maggie convinced me to go home. "You need rest, Clara. We'll call if anything changes." I drove back to the cabin, the creek glinting in the moonlight. I stopped where I'd seen Leela, where I'd pulled the backpack out. The mud still held my footprints. The backpack was gone, police evidence now. I stood there, the cold seeping into my bones, wondering if I'd imagined it all. My phone rang as I stepped inside. It was Maggie. "Clara, come back now. It's urgent." I broke every speed limit getting to the hospital, my heart pounding. Maggie met me at the entrance, her face unreadable. "He's alive," she said quickly, "but you need to come with me." She led me to a small office, where Tom, Emily, and a man in a suit waited. The man introduced himself as Dr. Paul Carter, a forensic geneticist. "We ran DNA tests on the boy," he said, "to identify his family. And," my voice was barely a whisper, "he's your great-nephew. His mother is Leela. His father, we're still working on that. But the boy shares about 12.5% of your DNA. He's Hannah's grandson." The room spun. Hannah's grandson, my daughter, dead 10 years, had a grandchild. "That's impossible," I said. "Hannah never had a child." "Leela was pregnant 3 years ago," Tom said. "She told no one. We found medical records from a clinic in St. Louis. She gave birth in secret, off the grid. The boy's about 2 years old now." "Leela had a son," I whispered. "And she tried to drown him." "There's more," Tom said, his voice heavy. "We're reopening Hannah's case. Her overdose, there are inconsistencies. We found texts on Lila's old phone from before Faye's funeral. She was supplying Hannah with drugs, knowing she was struggling. We think it wasn't an accident." The words hit like a freight train. Leela had killed Hannah, my daughter, and now she'd tried to kill her own son. "Way," I choked out. "We don't know yet," Tom said, "but we think it's tied to money. Hannah had a small trust fund from your husband's estate. Leela was the beneficiary if Hannah died. She got $50,000 after the overdose." I stood, needing air, needing to scream. My daughter, murdered. Her grandson, nearly drowned. All for money. I stumbled to the window, the hospital lights blurring through my tears. "Find her," I said. "Find Leela." "We're trying," Tom said. "She's gone underground. No credit cards, no phone. But we'll get her." Maggie took me to the pediatric ICU. The boy, my great-nephew, was in an incubator, tubes in his tiny arms, but his color was better, his chest rising steadily. "Can I touch him?" I asked. "Gently," Maggie said, guiding my hand through the incubator's port. His fingers curled around mine, warm and strong. I cried then, for Hannah, for this boy, for the family I'd lost and found. "He needs a name," Maggie said. "For the records, until we resolve custody." Hannah had loved the name Noah. She'd said it once, years ago, dreaming of a future she'd never have. "Noah," I said. "His name is Noah." The next weeks were a blur of bureaucracy. I applied for foster certification, and during background checks, home inspections, and a psychological evaluation that felt like an interrogation. "Do you resent Leela for Hannah's death?" the therapist asked. I wanted to say yes, but I said, "I just want Noah safe." The home visits were humiliating, strangers checking my fridge, my smoke alarms, my life. I spent $1,200 on a crib, a car seat, safety gates, dipping into savings I'd guarded since Earl's death. I visited Noah daily, watching him grow stronger. He started smiling, his dark eyes, Hannah's eyes, lighting up when I sang to him. Maggie taught me how to feed him, how to change his tiny diapers. "You're a natural," she said, but I felt like I was drowning, terrified of failing him like I'd failed Hannah. Tom called with updates. They traced Leela to a motel in Arkansas, but she was gone when they arrived. Her truck was found abandoned in Oklahoma, wiped clean. "She's smart," Tom said, "but we'll find her." 6 weeks after I pulled Noah from the creek, Emily called. "The judge is reviewing your case. You've met all requirements. If it goes well, you could have temporary custody next week." Hope flared, but so did fear. That night, my phone rang, an unknown number. I answered, my heart in my throat. "Clara," Lila's voice said, cold and sharp. "You have something I want." "Leela," I said, my voice shaking. "Where are you?" "Doesn't matter. I want my son. And I want the trust fund money, $50,000. You have access to it, now that Noah's alive." "You tried to kill him," I said, rage boiling over. "You killed Hannah." A pause, then a laugh. "You don't know the half of it. Hannah was weak, Clara. She begged for those pills. I just helped her along. Noah was a mistake. I never wanted him. But he's my ticket now. Bring him and the money to the old mill by the creek, midnight tomorrow, alone, or I'll make sure you lose him for good." She hung up. I sat frozen, Noah asleep in his crib beside me. I called Tom, sent him the call details. "We've got her," he said. "We'll set a trap. You go, but Noah stays safe with Maggie. We'll be there, hidden." The next day, Tom briefed me at the cabin. Snipers would be positioned in the trees, deputies in the shadows. I'd wear a wire, a tiny microphone pinned to my shirt. "Keep her talking," Tom said. "Get her to confess. If she threatens you, press this button 3 times. He showed me the panic button, a small device clipped to my belt. I didn't sleep that night. I watched Noah, memorizing his face, his tiny hands. "Your mama loved you," I whispered. "I'll make sure you're safe." At 10 p.m. Maggie took Noah to her house. I kissed him goodbye, my heart breaking. At 11:30, I drove to the mill, Tom hidden in the backseat. The old mill was a crumbling relic, its windows shattered, its walls sagging. I parked, my hands trembling. Tom slipped into the woods, his radio crackling softly. "We're in position," he whispered. Midnight. I walked to the mill, the wire cold against my skin. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, Leela stood in the shadows, her hair blonde now, her face gaunt. "You came," she said, almost mocking. "You said you wanted to talk," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear. "Where's Noah? Where's the money? I want answers first. Why did you kill Hannah? Why Noah?" She smirked. "Hannah was a mess. She owed me money, kept dragging me down. The drugs were easy, she wanted them. I just made sure she got too much. The trust fund was my reward. Noah, he was an accident. I thought I could start over, but he was a chain. So I got rid of him, or tried to." My blood boiled, but I kept her talking. "You planned it all. Hannah's death, Noah's, of course. And you made it harder, Clara. Always meddling, always judging. But you can't stop me. Where's my son?" I pressed the panic button. 1, 2, 3. "You'll never touch him." She pulled a knife, its blade glinting in the moonlight. "Last chance." The doors burst open. Police, Drop the weapon. Deputies swarmed, guns drawn. Leela froze, then dropped the knife, her face twisting in rage. They tackled her, cuffs snapping around her wrists. She screamed, but it was over. Tom helped me up. I hadn't realized I'd fallen. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said, my voice shaking. "You got her." "We got her. The wire recorded everything. She's done." I woke in the hospital, a bruise on my arm from falling, but otherwise unharmed. Maggie brought Noah to me, his smile lighting up the room. "You did it," she said. "He's safe." Leela was charged with Hannah's murder, attempted homicide of Noah, and assault. The trial was quick. Her confession on the wire was damning. She got life without parole. 3 months later, the judge granted me permanent custody of Noah. I adopted him, making him legally mine. I turned Hannah's old room into his, painting it blue, filling it with toys. Maggie became his unofficial aunt, Pastor Jim his grandfather figure. The town rallied around us, bringing meals, offering support. Noah grew, walking at 1, talking at 2, starting preschool at 3. Every milestone was a miracle, a defiance of the darkness Leela had brought. I told him about Hannah, how she'd loved the name Noah, how she'd have loved him. I never mentioned Leela. That would come later, when he was ready. On Noah's 5th birthday, we had a party by the creek, balloons, cake, laughter. Maggie sat with me, watching him run with other kids. "You saved him," she said. "You gave him a life." "I think he saved me," I replied. And I meant it. The Clara who'd lived in grief, alone in that cabin, was gone. Noah brought light, purpose, love. Some nights, I sit on the porch, Noah asleep inside, and look at the creek. I think about that day, the scream, the backpack, the boy who became my world. I think about Hannah, guiding me somehow, trusting me to save her son. Tragedy broke me once, but love rebuilt me. Noah is my proof, my promise, my reason.